Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. My guest this evening is Professor Emeritus, University of Colombo, Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda. Very good evening to you, Professor. Welcome to the program.
Good evening to you too, Mr. Faraz.
Thank you very much for coming. As you are your speciality is political science.
That's
I
right.
thought I'd ask you, because you've been a keen observer, and in your private life and in your professional life as a professor of political science, what do you think about the Aragallia? Did the people who turned up and supported Aragallia, was that a waste of time, or did we learn any lessons, or how do you see it?
Well, it's not a waste of time at all. That's a very wrong reading of what Aragallia was. Aragallia, in my understanding, is one of the rare moments in Sri Lanka's history, recent history, where citizens, came together to make series of demands on the government, also protest against government's, series of, experiences of misgovernance. Right? People have been actually suffering from those decisions that should not have been made by the government at that time. In terms of, you say the agrarian question in Sri Lanka about the rural, what the farmers had to suffer as a result of some of those decisions. And also there were also a severe shortage of essential, everyday items like petrol, diesel, electricity and cooking gas.
Okay, so those are the reasons why Aragallia came about. But what about the effects of Aragallia? Has there been any positivity that has flowed from the Aragallia?
Oh yes, for the first time, as I was going to say that, for the first time in Sri Lanka's history, recent history, Sri Lankan citizens woke up politically and showed that they have acquired certain degree of independence and freedom from the political class and the political parties who have been leading them to this, the disaster, economic and political and social disaster. So Sri Lankan citizens, for the first time, once again, demonstrated to the political class and also to the world that they are no longer subjects of this, ruling class. They have certain degree of independence, they have degree of independence, political judgment, political consciousness, political awareness, and also they want to tell the rulers, this is not the way to rule this country. There is, you have to be more democratic, you have to be accountable. You can't be continuing to be corrupt rulers. So the people wanted a kind of a new political culture, and so, what has been, called, change in the whole system, of political, economic and social order.
But Professor Uyangoda, don't you agree that by the time Aragallia started, which must have been about 72, 73 years into independence,
Right.
And so what Aragallia meant, really, was that for 70 plus years, Sri Lanka's rulers had led the people of this country down a very slippery path indeed, which culminated in silly decisions like the decision on fertilizer, the complete and utter mismanagement of the economy, all roosted in one. It doesn't mean that Gotabaya Rajapaksa was responsible for that solely. It was a culmination. The people of Sri Lanka were led into this subsidized lifestyle where everything was subsidized, including the fuel bill. And so finally matters came to roost. But now, post all that, do you detect any difference in the management of our economy, in the focus to lead towards an export-orientated economy, all in the quest for dollars, which we obviously don't have or very little of?
I think that's a theme that needs to be discussed quite seriously. You know, at the moment, you know, there are a lot of misunderstanding and myths, you know, being spread to say that Sri Lanka now has entered a new path of economic recovery.
Do you not agree with that?
I don't agree with that, you know.
Why? Why don't you
Because Sri Lanka's economic crisis is much more structurally rooted. You know, it's also part of the whole, you know, neoliberal, you know, economic development growth policies that governments have been, you know, implementing since 1970s.
I'm glad you're mentioning this whole thing about this neoliberalism and so on. And here's why. When the Rajapaksas, when Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president and he was taking, you know, fighting the war, if you like, and so on, the Western powers were rather critical. They always urged him to go for the peaceful settlement and so on. A peaceful settlement which he tried for at the beginning of his term, but the more peaceful he appeared to be, the greater the attack from the LTTE. And whatever our government did, whoever who did, whatever they did, they managed to get rid of terrorism by and large. But the Western world weren't very happy. They had many. They wouldn't help as much as they would do now. Now we have a president who is the pseudo-democrat, right? I call it the pseudo-democrat, if I may, because look at the things that he's done since he's become the president. He's arrested innocent Aragalaya protesters, innocent protesters. He has ignored those people who came out of temple trees armed with poles and whatnot and had free access up to the Aragalaya in Galle Face and attacked these innocent protesters. To this day, we have seen no legal repercussions. Never. Not one. Right? So can you see the Western world? What are they doing? They're not saying anything. They are strangely silent. Why? Is it because they've got the right man in the presidency to perhaps serve their agenda?
Well, I think the situation is a little more complicated than what we have been describing. Although you know, point to a very important question. You see, the present president obviously came into power with the blessings of the Western powers and also our neighboring country as well. You see, you know, in Sri Lankan politics has come to a situation where it is not only the people of Sri Lanka who decide who should be their rulers. You know, the global powers and regional powers play a very crucial role in determining who should be the president, who should be running the country. So that's one part of the problem. Secondly, now you were kind of alluding to what happened on the 9th of May last year.
Yes.
Actually, 9th of May, there's unleashing of that kind of violence, officially sponsored violence on the innocent people who were protesting in the, you know, in Kolopitiya, near temple trees and Galle Face. There's no inquiry whatsoever about what happened on that day.
Absolutely. So they're so silent.
Yeah, so silent. I think it's a deliberate, you know, policy of, you know, not making, you know, the whole process transparent. You see, the government has probably deliberately, they may have done inquiries, but I don't think those inquiries have been really completed. And there's no, you know, nobody has been really been blamed for that unleashing of violence.
Nobody's being held responsible.
Right?
Nobody's being held responsible.
Exactly.
It's like so many things in Sri Lanka. It's like so many things in Sri Lanka at the moment. We had various events, if you like, that has happened. One of them, of course, is the 9th of May.
Right.
We have no inquiry
I agree.
about that.
Yes.
Another one that comes in mind is the central bank bond scam.
That's right.
We have had no inquiry about that. And Sri Lanka is littered with such matters. The garlic scam, the sugar scam, all these sort of scams where the government of Sri Lanka, the people of Sri Lanka lost money and nothing gets done. There is no move towards a political donations act. There's no move towards making sure that parliamentarians openly provide their asset declarations and the transparency, and the mere mention of that has my guest laughing.
So this list of complaints that you have been making can be extended.
Of course, it can be. I'd probably need to go into the news to give you the whole list.
Yeah, but the important thing we need to remember is that we have a political class, and also a bureaucratic class, and also business class who enjoy a great deal of impunity. That's what you're also saying. And that's one of the problems of Sri Lanka's political system, the legal system of justice. You said that is precisely why Sri Lankan citizens last year told the political class, enough is enough, we want a systemic change, we want a new political culture. Look at the way Sri Lankan political class has been responding to that. Now they are introducing a new legislation called anti-terrorism legislation, which is worse than, more draconian than the previous, Prevention of Terrorism Act. So what the government is now trying to do is, unfortunately, to turn all Sri Lankan citizens who have some degree of political self-respect into terrorists. The new law, if it is, I hope that it won't be passed by Parliament. In case it's be passed by the Parliament, Sri Lanka's democracy, rule of law, human rights, and citizens' freedom, even to think different from what the political class, the ruling class does. You see, that is an extremely at risk. Sri Lankan citizens would largely be expected to live like the subjects of medieval kings. So in a democracy, citizens are not subjects. People are citizens who are aware of the fact that the rulers don't have political power unless people give them political power through peaceful and free and fair elections. So we have a situation where our ruling class, or our so-called political class, has become totally afraid of the people who have a sense of political dignity, political awareness and political awakening. So that's why Sri Lanka will have a situation where probably that yesterday a gold face from today is no longer accessible to people other than for religious activities. I think
but that's against the ordinance, because the ordinance says that Goldface Green was for the pleasure of the ladies and children. That's what the original ordinance said.
Yeah, right. Now,
that's what it said.
What is the new cabinet decision says?
Yes, well, this is all lopsided, and it brings me, Professor, to this little point, which perhaps we can discuss after the break. But a few days ago, Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, the Archbishop of Colombo, he said in an interview, I believe that was carried in the front pages of the Island or the Sunday Island, and he alluded to this. He also said, actually, he said something on the lines that the political power nowadays, because of the lack of an investigation into the Easter tragedy, he said that some people are getting away with murder for the sake of securing political power or maintaining power. Now, this is one hell of a how do you do in my book. First of all, in the days gone by, they just bribed their way. You got the quarter bottle of arak, you got your lunch packet, the dinner packet, the T-shirt, the cap, you got the lot, and wow, you got your vote. Now, first of all, they bribed their way. Somewhere along the line, they promised rice from the skies. And then, now, do we have a situation where they are murdering, killing outside the law their own citizenry just to get power? What's going on?
You see, this has been happening since the 1970s, actually. You see, we had a kind of a series of civil wars in Sri Lanka. the 1971, 1970, 1983 onwards, we had the war, protracted war. You see, violence has been a part of Sri Lanka's politics, unfortunately. But you see, the political class has been largely responsible for sustaining a system that creates the kind of violence legitimate and justified, as we have been describing. So that is the tragedy of Sri Lankan politics. That's also precisely why Sri Lankan citizens last year started demanding that they needed a new political culture. That's also what this present government is trying to prevent from being repeated by the citizens.
Thank you, Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda. We are now about to take a break, take a peek at this evening's headlines from the Primetime News team, led tonight by my producer also, Shehan Ranatunga. It happens to be his last working day. He's going on to other pastures. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
Stern warning from the President. Says education would be declared an essential service if paper marking is not conducted next week. China unaware of a request to export talk macaques from Sri Lanka, says Chinese embassy. Paddy harvests of the Maha season still at homes after failing to fetch a reasonable price. An attorney appears at the TID on behalf of former Attorney General, hands over a 7-paged legal objection. TV1 in exciting new partnership with Australian Broadcasting Corporation. 36 firearms seized from the Karandeniya army camp over the Ahungalla murder investigation. Protect yourself from the extreme heat. A warning from health officials.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda, Professor Emeritus at the University of Colombo. And thank you for your questions. 0772 300 305, perhaps a card on your screen. 0772 300 305. I have a question already here, Professor Uyangoda. It's
Yes.
for you. And it says here, Professor Uyangoda, can you please tell us honestly whether you are afraid you will be victimized by the rulers?
Well, you never know, because if the New Terrorism Act comes into being, of course, I'll have to be very careful in what I say and what I do. And almost all Sri Lankan citizens will be compelled to take, extreme precautions in what they think, what they say, and what they do.
But that's not democracy.
It's not at all. That's why, I have been saying that, we are marking a new phase of Sri Lankan politics in which democracy is being, democracy is coming to an end, actually.
Another one. Yes, the Aragale made an indelible mark in the history of Sri Lanka. The citizens asserted themselves. Now, some sections trying to make out that it was a failure. What is your view, Professor Uyangoda?
Well, Aragale is a failure in a limited sense of the term, because it has not been able to, promote kind of a significant political transformation in the immediate sense, right? So it has in a way opened the door for the kind of political change that we have been witnessing for the past nearly 1 year. But what is really significant is that it signaled that Sri Lankan citizens are ready to take up the challenge of transforming Sri Lankan politics peacefully in the direction of more democracy. So that is the positive side of the Aragalaya.
But if we return to current political affairs, what do we have to say about what's going on now?
What's going on now is, there's a very serious process of what I call de-democratization.
Yeah.
That's right. That's one point. The other is that Sri Lankan politics at the moment seems to be, quite in a kind of state of great deal of uncertainty. We don't know, what degree of political stability is there, in the context of this rapid, changes to the economy, in the society, and also the regime stability is also under serious, kind of doubt at the moment, because there are, all kinds of stories in the media suggesting that the relationship between the two partners of the government, the United National Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, that relationship is not as strong as it used to be a few months ago. So the president is also trying to consolidate his position by inviting other political parties in the opposition to join him to form a national government.
What of that? What do you think? What chances?
I don't think it's a possibility, because you see, the relationship between the the Pohottuwa, that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and the United National Party is not as strong as it used to be. So that in a way weakens the position of the president. But on the other hand, the opposition parties are also so deeply divided. They cannot, pose a serious, political challenge to the president. So, what we can see is that, certain degree of, uncertainty for about a year. So that is also one reason why president is trying to, push for a presidential election, not holding either local government elections or provincial council elections or even parliamentary elections. You see, a very clear message that the people gave during the past couple of months, particularly at the beginning of the local government election, is that the vast majority of Sri Lankan voters have effectively moved away from both the UNP and the Sri Lankan Podujana Peramuna. So the point there is that Sri Lankan people are ready to elect a new political class, if the elections are held. So the government does not want to allow that to happen. So I think the government has been very worried about the possible outcome of a local government election. That's why all the government has been trying to not to let any elections to be held unless that election ensures the government's candidate's victory. So that's why they are aiming at the presidential election. Perhaps, they cannot hold the presidential elections until May next year. It will be after May next year.
But if the president so wants, he can now dissolve parliament.
But I don't think he will dissolve parliament.
No, that's not the question. The question is whether legally, constitutionally, whether he has the right to. He does, doesn't he?
He can, but he won't do that.
No.
Because it's a tremendous political risk. So that is why president would be interested in holding presidential election first, but he has to make sure that conditions are in favor of him. First and foremost, he has to make sure that the opposition parties continue to remain deeply divided. Then secondly, he will have to also make sure that the Pohottuwa, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, will not have its own candidate, right? So he has to somehow repair the relationship between United National Party and the Pohottuwa, right? For him to ensure that he will win at the next presidential election. So it's a quite complicated and uncertain situation. So we don't know what will happen at the next presidential election, because the Sri Lankan politics is very fragmented. You know, in a fragmented situation like this, political outcome would depend a lot on, you know, undemocratic interventions by the political class. You know, Sri Lankan politics, the electoral outcomes have been decided by so many other extra democratic factors. Even look at the 2019 election outcome. You know, there are so many other factors than the democratic process or democratic values and democratic interventions that have decided the outcomes of elections. So we have to expect those things this year, rather next year as well. So in a situation of political uncertainty, in a fragmented polity, political trajectories cannot be, clearly predicted. So but it's unpredictable.
Amidst all this, we have the real problem, which is a lack of dollars, that we haven't got enough foreign exchange reserves. Everyone's feeling very happy because the IMF have agreed to give us a loan. It must be the only country in the world that celebrates getting a loan. But I don't know. It's almost laughable as to what they're doing. But not a single politician worth their salt is talking comprehensively with a plan to earn dollars for Sri Lanka to up its game. The tourism industry is in the doldrums. They're very happy when there are 50,000 people arrive, whereas before we used to have 4 times that number or 5 times that number in a month, So there is it's all half-baked plans, and nobody is willing to turn the oven up and heat the things to the right temperature.
You see, in my view, Sri Lanka's economic crisis is much more serious than
what is being portrayed.
Earning dollars. You see, Sri Lanka has a much more serious political crisis than that. That crisis is rooted in the whole, development strategy that Sri Lankan governments have been adopting since 1970s, with the help of the global economic powers, the World Bank, IMF, and Asian Development Bank. Sri Lanka will have to think about an entirely new approach to Sri Lanka's economic crisis. One. Secondly, Sri Lanka's economic crisis requires a long-term process of economic rebuilding. Thirdly, the present policy that the present government is, implementing with the help of the International Monetary Fund is a disastrous, policy option. The reason why I am, describing it as a disastrous policy option is this. The reason.
We've got a few seconds left.
The entire burden of the economic recovery is passed on to the poor and the middle classes in Sri Lanka. So that will create a tremendous degree of social unrest, social discontent, and also eventual political unrest in the country.
Thank you very much, Professor Jayadeva Uyangoda, for being on Newsline Live. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the Prime Time News. This evening read to you by Shehan Ranatunga, who was the producer of this program for several years, along with Harshana. And it's his last night. So we wish him well for his future, but also for the absolute wonderful service he's done for all of us here at programming at News First. Thank you. And thank you very much for watching. Take care. Have a great evening as much as you can. And God bless you all.